So I did a little bit of planning that wasn't recorded. I have some notes here about events that happen on each floor and in each room when the players are exploring. They'll have some things to run into so that it's not just this blank castle. I wanted to make it a little bit more sandboxy, I suppose, when it came to trying to solve the mystery in Hogwarts. Something, though, that I ran into as a problem was this is only going to be 4 sessions for some of my players. I have 3 groups going through this, and 2 of those groups only have 4 sessions that we're doing. So I need to make sure that I feed them enough information each week to wrap up the entire thing on the 4th. So I started trying to figure out how I want to distribute the information and what I feel like they need to learn at the end of each week. This here kind of details the overall mystery that's happening at Hogwarts for those 4 weeks. And what they kind of need to discover by the end in order to have all of the answers, I suppose. And now, of course, the players don't have to have all of the answers. They could solve only some of the mysteries that are there. But ideally, in order to give them the satisfaction of the entire campaign, I want them to solve the big one. And that's the curse of the Defense Against the Dark Arts position and how to stop that. So ideally, that's the stuff I want them to get to. I also found that I already ran 1 session with my players. And some of the things that I ran into as problems when they were exploring is that I gave one of the characters, I made custom characters too, which I can bring up. Of course, none of the Dungeons and Dragons characters fit super well into what like students would do, and the spells don't match what Harry Potter spells do, so I had to do a lot of custom stuff. So this is one of the custom characters. This is like kind of like the rogue background. So they have a skill called Eavesdropper, and I didn't really take into account the fact that they would want to eavesdrop as opposed to talking with students or teachers or exploring. They opted to eavesdrop instead of either of those. So I had to do some ad-libbing and put some of the information from both of those into the eavesdropped skill. So that's something that I'm going to have to fix because I do have an eavesdropper, a trickster in every single one of my groups, and they might all decide to do eavesdropping. So that's something I'm going to have to fix. I also discovered that one of the things that I have, this is my healer. My healer has a -1 intelligence, which means that in theory, they might not be able to read. As far as Dungeons and Dragons rules go, or they're really slow at reading. That's probably the easiest thing to solve when it comes to the student going to school. But I did have them really good at observing, so they can learn really fast if they watch somebody perform something, but they're very bad when it comes to learning by book or writing. So I liked that theory, but it played out, it was a little bit too convoluted when it came to actual gameplay. So that would be something I would have to fix too, is figuring out how to make this, I don't know, easier to apply to gameplay. I'll put my characters up on the screen and you guys can pause if you want to read them. At the end of the video. I also had to make my own spells. But the spells I feel like worked out pretty well. Though I still have to test some of the spells, of course. I only have five players, and not all of my classes were played. And some of my players, it didn't use some of their spells, so it's hard to know if it was a good balance or not. Because, of course, they're the play testers, basically, for everything that's custom made. There's a chance, of course, that my characters won't run into any of these events, and that's something that you have to kind of deal with as a dungeon master. I also realize that each one of these events takes time. So if it's not leading them to the clues that I need them to discover, I might have to change the events to fit better into a story instead of just like fun little side events. So those are some of the things that I ran into. I also just, my players weren't very interested in finding secret passageways. That was not a goal that they had when they were walking around. They just gave me a lot of really specific things. So what happened was I would tell them, would you like to look around? And then I would have them select a floor that they could look around at. I did, I'll show you my floor plan. So this is the floor plan that I used. And I had them select what floor, 2 or 3 floors they wanted to explore on. But one of my characters that selected exploring decided they specifically wanted to play around in the astronomy tower. And that's not saying that they want to explore the entire floor, which means that they missed literally all of my secret passages that I put in there because I didn't put a single one in the astronomy tower. And then another character that was just exploring decided to go out onto the Hogwarts grounds and didn't do anything inside. Well, obviously there's no secret passageways outside, so they didn't discover any. So that was a problem, because they need to discover them if they want to solve the mysteries. So I basically just had to give them the secret passage that was in their common room. I mean, that one's essential to find first anyways. So kind of despite what they rolled for the skill challenge, or when it came to looking around, they found it anyways, because it was necessary. So that's kind of how I ran things. I also put in 2 different prefix that they could talk to in their common room. They were really important in case players did not find information. They were going to be there to provide information the players missed. And again, that's important if you're running a story like campaign. Making sure that you can pick up and move clues around to different places so your players eventually run into it, but they don't feel railroaded. That's really important. So there's clues that they could discover over here, but then they could also get them from talking with people. And if they don't do either of them, when you ask them where they're walking around to, you can stop them midway on their way to that location and be like, oh, this thing happened. So you just have to be a little bit more flexible. Say, yes, you can do that, but this stops you on the way, or, this person stops to talk to you on the way and gives you information. You just have to be clever about it. So I hid some treasures when it comes to events and things like that. The ballroom was important. It's locked, but because I have a rogue in each group, ideally, and they come with Alohomora, the unlock spell, the ballroom will be accessible in each group. They do have to go over to it, though I'm not going to force them to go over there, but there are 2 secret passages over in the ballroom that will help them. One of them leads to a combat option that they have to clear out the hidden passage of doxies. Now I'm probably going to use pixies or something like that from the Dungeon Master's Guide, and just call them doxies. Of course, that's what you do when it comes to reskinning. Just call them something else. So So ideally they find the secret passages as long as they're like looking around and dragging their hands across things and investigating. They're going to find the secret passage because they're necessary. You never want to make the skill challenge that's important too hard. I also have combat. Again, both of them are in the basement. This one is when they're wandering around the halls after hours. So ideally they would get out of their common room after curfew. And that's when they would run into the ghosts that my teacher Vinda has in her office. She uses the ghosts for study. And they're reacting weird to all of these, curses and things like that are happening at Hogwarts, and so they'll attack the students. Vinda is an important teacher in the story here, so ideally you'd have her give students information. They run into her more often than other teachers because she has more information to give about the subject of ghosts. She's my ancient studies teacher, and she's new. Just to put a little bit of flair, Vinda is from the Beauxbatons school. She just graduated and she got the teaching job at Hogwarts. Just to give it a little flair to tie in world events into what they're doing. For the ground floor, again, I put treasure, that they can run into this treasure at any point in time. They just have to look around, basically. Courtyard's got bullies only on the weekends, though. Everybody's obviously running to class to and from, so bullies can't just gather around out there. I haven't written the bully scenario for this one. It's important to kind of know how your NPCs will behave. There should be dialogue. They should use their words. They should just outright attack, because that's not very logical. So I need to write this scenario for that still. And then the entrance has one of the portraits that were hidden there. And I make sure to kind of talk about where it's hidden and how it's hidden and why it was put there. I have a little puzzle for them to discover at night in the greenhouses. Again, once they discover how to get out after curfew, very essential. And if they're wandering around looking for things, and they get to the greenhouses, there's little plants that will chant and sway. And they basically just have to use the spell Alohomora. Again, there's a thief in every group, so that's the perfect spell for every single group that I run. And they have to figure out what the plants are basically chanting. They'll get, I think I have them getting a spell. Yeah. Though I didn't write it in. They get this spell if they solve the puzzle. I haven't decided. I think it's only going to be one person. It's going to be like a magical item that will teach them the spell. And it's a one-time use. On the weekend, I'm going to, again, put another combat option in there. Strangler Figs. I can't remember if I found something that... Oh, yeah, okay. These are going to be the Strangler Figs, the Vine Blight, and the Needle Blight. They're pretty low challenge rating. I mean, my characters are level 2, so I can put multiple in there. It's better to do multiple monsters than single monsters. That way, each character can feel the threat. I can have them target different characters, and they feel threatened and the pressure of battle. If one character is off and doesn't take a ton of damage, it's not that big of a deal, but you kind of want them to feel more involved, I guess, in the combat. This one also has a secret painting. I talk about what it's doing and the clues that characters can see in discovering where it is. So even before they talk to, Professor Trelawney about the paintings or anything, they should be able to find the painting despite that, because it has effects on the world around it. Secret passage in the West Tower. I don't suspect my players will go over into the West Tower, though hopefully they find the kitchens. My goal is that they find the kitchens. Though I, of course, don't know how to lead them to that kitchen, so that's something I still have to discover. I have another combat thing for the hospital wing. She has to clear out the magical bugs that appear, I know, super gross, in the beds every time. So she asks them to help her, and she'll give them a spell that they don't have. I've got some bullies in Transfiguration that are going to put a bunch of angry crows in their bags. They're going to swap them out, use a Transfiguration switching spell to swap them out, and they'll have to fight those birds. This should be an easy combat, a very quick one. Again, because this can take place in between classes if they head that way. Then you can see that there's a lot of other places I haven't written events for. But again, I have to be sensitive to the fact that they only have 4 sessions. So making some of the events quicker or specifically giving them clues is important now from here on out. That about sums up how things went as far as my planning goes. Oh, I also put lectures in. I didn't record all of these. My first session, I had just 2 lectures. Basically everybody in the group explored the castle or talked to students or whatever. Once everybody did 1 round of that, I put them in lectures. The lectures, as you can see, are pretty short, and they have a lot of questions so that the characters can interact and guess. Now, of course, the players aren't going to know the answers to this. It's not like they actually read the textbooks or anything like that. But ideally, I would like them to use their skills and do skill checks to see if they can find the answers. And that will give them points at the end. So each one basically had 2 questions. Ideally, two different people would answer those. But each character has a class that they're very good at, so they have advantage in all the rolls when it comes to the questions in there. So if one person takes all the questions because that's their specialty, not a big deal. And then they have homework. I haven't really decided what I want to do with the idea of homework. I think the homework could be fun. If the players actually wanted to do it, they could bring it back, and I would give them extra points to spend when it comes to buying spells. But I haven't completely decided yet how I want to play that out. Some of them are fun, like the herbology one. They have to go around the castle grounds identifying which trees are magical and mundane. That one could be a fun event for them to do, and would be a really good time for me to put clues in, particularly about the owlery, which is out on the grounds. So I think that one would be fun just to roleplay out in the session, but when it comes to the essays and stuff like that, I'm not really sure. But it wouldn't make any sense if I didn't give them homework in the lectures, right? So, I mean, they're at school. But yeah, we did herbology as well, and one of my players was like, oh, that's it? Because there was no event in here. I actually had a combat. They practiced hexes and curses on animated swords. And I explained to them that the swords were only tagging them. They weren't actually cutting them up and doing damage. So it role-played as a tag instead of, blood anywhere. So they liked that one, but the neurology, I didn't plan a scenario or a combat or anything like that. And one of my players was like, wait, that's it? That's all we're going to do? And I was like, yeah. So he was expecting another event in herbology. So I did put in a little game in herbology for my next group. Instead of combat, it's a game. That was my phone going off. And then I talked with one of my players afterwards who said that they felt that there was too few lectures within the first week, so I think I'm going to be putting my history of magic in there as well. With 2 questions, and I would put no event in this one. So I would have 2 events and 1 non-event. But I also want to give all of my players who have different class specialties a chance to shine, I suppose. He also talked about how each thing only had 2 questions to answer, which meant that only 4 players got extra points to spend, and I should give everyone an opportunity to do that. So putting in a total of 6 questions over 3 classes makes it a little bit more fair. Now, of course, certain players are going to be more creative, I guess, with their answers, or be more interested in answering. So you got to keep that in mind, but I mean, that's technically on your players. So yeah, I wrote all of those while I wasn't recording. So sorry. So that about sums it up. I will put up all of the custom characters that I did, and you guys can pause if you want to read and make your own thing. But that's the end of my talking and my experience with the campaign.